Hello and welcome to another edition of the Morning Bulletin. My name is Emmet, and I'm joined today by my Liverpool.com colleague Andrew Beasley. Andrew, today we're going to take a look at Paul Gorst's terrific article in the Liverpool Echo about Liverpool and the Portuguese transfer market. I'm assuming you've read the article, and we've seen, obviously, with the January signing of Luis Diaz, how Liverpool obviously have been linked to Diaz, but it was thought that a move would happen in the summer, and then obviously with Tottenham's interest in Diaz, Liverpool kind of put their foot on the accelerator and got the deal done. And it's fair to say Luis Diaz has hit the ground running.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's been a breath of fresh air. I mean, he may yet prove the difference between Liverpool winning, well, no trophies and 4 trophies. You know, wherever they end up between 1 and 4. Yeah, he's done incredibly well, and I think what's great is that he's done what he was doing in Portugal, and it sounds like an obvious thing, but so many teams buy players because they're good players, not because they're going to fit into their team necessarily. I suppose you'd sort of look at what Man United do. That's their sort of thing. You know, they will buy the best players they can, but it doesn't mean they're going to work together as a team. Whereas Liverpool identify players that should work with their players, and with Diaz, that certainly seems to be the case so far in these first couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to think of a Liverpool signing that has hit the ground so well as Luis Diaz, and all the more considering that he was a January signing, which is, you always hear Jurgen Klopp say that he doesn't really like January signing because it takes time. He wants a pre-season, but it's almost like Diaz has played at Liverpool for 2 or 3 years at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of people will say you can't make good signings in January. And then people sort of counter that by saying, well, how about Luis Suarez as an example? But people sort of forget Suarez took a while to get going. He wasn't the amazing Suarez that he became when he first joined. He did okay that first half season, but he wasn't, hitting the heights that he would later go on to do. Whereas Diaz already seems to be. I think it's interesting. Klopp has said that because he came in January somewhat unexpectedly, they just sort of allow him to get on with it rather than, deeply sort of coaching him in the sort of pressing drills and all these sorts of things. Presumably there isn't really time when they're playing every 3 days. And maybe that's helped him, a bit of freedom. It's sort of, it enables him to play his own game, and it's working out really well so far.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't obviously scored a lot of goals. I think he only has 2 at this point.
2, I think.
But
yeah.
it's his overall game and his performance, and he's kind of, as you say, he's given a new lease of life to Liverpool at a certain point when it looked like they were miles outside of the title race, and now everything's possible. But with the Diaz deal done, and we're seeing links now to a couple more of Porto's players, Vitinha and Otavio.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the Portuguese market is somewhere where Liverpool haven't explored enough in the past, and do you think they'll do more of it in the future now with the success of Diaz?
Yeah, that has to be a possibility. I mean, in terms of the past, I can't think off the top of my head other players they've signed from Portugal. There probably are, but I can't think of any. And yeah, it sort of makes sense to possibly target that, because you can probably get players for slightly cheaper than you can from the other leagues. I know there's a lot of talk about whether it's in reality now the 5th best league ahead of France. Various sort of coefficients and rankings and so on suggest that it might be, because obviously France have PSG, and then not so much sort of strength in depth behind that. So yeah, I mean, it could be the next sort of market for Liverpool to exploit. You've seen over the years they've tend to. Obviously, they buy the players they want from whichever clubs they're at. But there was a period where they bought loads of players from Southampton. Some worked, some sort of didn't. They've bought 3 players from the Red Bull teams. They got Alisson and Salah from Roma. It doesn't mean that these teams become like feeder clubs or anything as sort of dramatic as that. And maybe it's just coincidence in some ways. I mean, you'd buy Salah and Alisson wherever they played, I think. But yeah, it could be time to to sort of do a bit more business in Portugal more frequently. I mean, when you look at the styles of play of Porto and Liverpool, they're not that dissimilar. I've done a couple of bits this week for the Echo on Otavio and Vitinha. And you look at them and they're sort of top of the advanced statistics don't really exist for the Portuguese league, or at least not publicly. But they're top of the charts for things like possession regains in the final third, which is exactly what Liverpool, are looking for in players. And those guys are Otavio's top and Vitinha's about 6th or 7th, something like that. So it makes sense to sort of go for these players that play at clubs with a similar style. Again, like we said with Diaz, helps them probably fit in a bit more easily. And maybe Porto will become that for Liverpool.
And as Paul Gorst wrote about in his article, Liverpool have now kind of formed a real good relationship with Porto, and that obviously helps move things for the Diaz deal when it looked like Tottenham was about to snap him up. So it could be something that Liverpool exploit over the next maybe couple of years. Vitinha obviously being younger than Otavio would probably appeal more to Liverpool and FSG. But yeah, he could be a one to keep an eye on in the next couple of years, you would imagine. What was interesting in the article was that Liverpool looked at João Felix before he moved to Atletico Madrid and Bruno Fernandes. How do you think in a parallel universe that if those deals had happened, how do you think they would have worked out, or would they have worked out even at all?
Yeah, it's an interesting one to ponder, isn't it? I mean, I think someone like Fernandes, I think Liverpool fans probably hate him because he plays for United, but it would have been interesting to see how he'd have got on. But then it's also, you sort of wonder how would he have quite fit into the sort of Liverpool system, because obviously when he first came to United and everything was going through him, he sort of looked amazing. And then obviously they brought in Ronaldo, and he's not had a bad season, Fernandes, by any means, but obviously it sort of changes the sort of structure and how the team works and things like that. And he's possibly not been quite as effective. And you sort of look at, I mean, they're not the same exactly, but you sort of look at Liverpool when they had Coutinho, they didn't really rely on the fullbacks and things like that. Then Coutinho left and Alexander-Arnold and Robertson came to the fore. Could you then plug Fernandes into that? Do they lose out a bit? Does he take their sort of share of stuff? As much as he's a great player, it doesn't mean that it would automatically work. João Felix, you can imagine possibly fitting the system a bit better from the off. But, you sort of have to trust the transfer brains at Liverpool, because they don't get much wrong. If they didn't think it was right to go for these players, then it probably was the best for the team. But certainly interesting to sort of wonder about how things might have turned out.
Yeah, I mean, I think Felix, maybe you could have made a case for and try and fit into Liverpool's system, but I think Fernandes, it would have been oil and water, I believe, because he is a number 10 and Liverpool haven't played with a number 10 since Coutinho left. And they're obviously a better, more structured, more cohesive unit because Coutinho left. That's kind of the thing with number 10s. You kind of have to build a team around them. And the team as a whole is perhaps not as good as a consequence. And obviously Liverpool got better then. Obviously the money helped to pay Virgil van Dijk and Alisson, but yeah, I mean that comes with a number 10. It's, you have to build a team around them, and you kind of become one-dimensional in the sense that if you mark a number 10, you kind of cut off the creativity, and as you say, Liverpool's fullbacks with Trent and Andy Robertson have come into their own post-Coutinho, so I don't think Fernandes perhaps would have worked out, especially not in the current 4-3-3 system. But Felix, I think, would have been interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's an interesting player, obviously, because he moved for ridiculous sum of money, even when he was very young. But and obviously he doesn't sort of feel like a sort of Simeone player, does he? By any stretch of most people's imagination, I think. But Yeah, as you say, I think he feels like one that could possibly have worked for Liverpool. I mean, who knows? Maybe, in the future, who can say what's going to happen? I mean, he'll certainly draw interest from all the top clubs, I should think, whenever he sort of moves on, and maybe he'll end up at Liverpool. You never know.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, I think it's reasonable to say that Fernandes won't join Liverpool at this point, but with
Yeah.
João Felix, you never know, and he's only 22, so there's always hope. But yeah, that'll do us for today's edition. Be sure to check out the website liverpool.com, check out the YouTube channel, all the usual places for our daily content, news, opinions, and features. And we'll be back again tomorrow.